Hi, everyone. Welcome to the relationship between music, art, and psychedelics. This is a panel discussion that is to be inclusive of the audience as well. So if anyone has a question that comes up during this conversation, please do not hesitate to get involved. I'll do my best to sort of monitor the chat as we go along. Eileen is working vigorously to get visuals going, but they are here in spirit and body. I'm going to give a little description for everyone. Just go down the list here. Eileen Hall is an Ecuadorian Scottish creative director, artist, and explorer, founder of Teos, an organization supporting the protection of jungles and endangered habitats in Ecuador, as well as exploring our relationship to nature and its role in well-being through art, music, and science. Eileen is a watercolorist and painter, and she created the cover art for John Hopkins' latest album, Music for Psychedelic Therapy. So Eileen, thank you so much for being here today. Jumping along to Tom Middleton. Tom's an award-winning expert in functional music, sound design, sensory innovation, and sleep. With a diverse 3-decade background in music and broadcasting, he co-founded pioneering ambient electronic outfit Global Communication and Jedi Knights, later as Cosmos. Tom has shifted his career towards mental health and well-being and is certified in sleep science, and stress management coaching, and mental health first aid. Thank you for being here, Tom, very much. Jeff Rona is a prolific composer and recording artist whose work spans film, television, video games, and several solo albums, acclaimed for scores and solo work that move fluidly between electronics, ambient landscapes, and meticulous orchestral writing with a recognizable style and strong sense of emotion and storytelling. Thank you for being here, Jeff.
Thank you.
And
I did not write that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I pulled it from various internet sources. Alex Payne is, among other things, the CEO of Volta, a revolutionary free desktop application designed for musicians who want to take their live performances to the next level on Twitch. Developed with the latest 3D technology, Volta offers an immersive experience to both artists and their fans by creating stunning virtual venues where artists can perform and interact with their audience in real time. There's Eileen Hall in the flesh. Oh, for a second. All right, so we've got, the reason we're here today is because Microdose Music has launched. Microdose Music is a container for music that can be seen as medicine, music that can be implemented in a medicinal manner. The conversation starts at Psychedelics, and it's a huge conversation. For anyone in the chat, for anyone new to this space, for longtime veterans of this space, what a fascinating space. In my experience, conversations around the psychedelic lead back to this human experience. What is the human experience? How can we make this planet a healthier, more equitable, more highly elevated, spiritually resonant experience, right? Because we could all sit around and talk about what we like to do with our time, how we like to express ourselves creatively. But everybody knows that in 2023, this world has a lot of challenges. It always will. But part of the gift of being alive is the ability to rise up and kind of confront these challenges and use our ingenuity and our creativity and our imagination to help make the human experience better, right? I think that's safe that all of us are probably interested in that. So when we talk about music for psychedelic therapy, I'd like to get your initial thoughts on, first of all, what do you think constitutes the notion of psychedelic? I mean, look, we're going to ask broad questions. They're impossible to answer, but just do your best to give me some of your thoughts on psychedelic. What does that mean to you? Whoever wants to go first. What does psychedelic mean to you?
Well, it seems to be about a range of experiences brought on through various means. For some people, it seems to be meditation. For some people, it seems to be substances that bring about a state that we don't normally walk in on a day-to-day basis. And within that state, magical things have a potential to happen.
And when we say magical things, we're talking about things that are inspiring, particularly inspiring, or helpful, or motivational, or what does magic mean to you? Take one step further.
Well, when I was just starting to study yoga and meditation, there was a word that they used to use, which is the word Maya, Maya, Maya. And Maya basically is the Sanskrit word for illusion. But really, its definition in yoga was that which we see with our eyes is not real. And that became kind of the fundamental step one, that what we perceive as the world often comes through through our sensory organs, and we as humans tend to kind of rely on our sensory organs to be a window into the world. When we step beside them, beyond them, away from them, even for a few moments, we get to enter into a different relationship with the world, with the universe, with other people. And I think in and of itself, that constitutes magic to me, that you're experiencing the world in a way that isn't the day-to-day that we experience with our eyes and ears.
Beautiful, Jeff. Thank you. Would anyone else care to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think looking at it from like a neurophysiological perspective, like that is not my domain expertise by any means, but like I've read up enough to understand like what happens to your brain. Like I think anyone who's here is probably aware that like the default mode network of your brain kind of quiets down when you either, like Jeff said, either do psychedelics or meditate, like in for long enough. And what's significant about that, and like what I think is really amazing about those experiences, is the sensory input is the same, right? Like you're taking in the same sort of sensory inputs, but like but the way that your brain wires them together is different, and you get to see them you get to experience things in a different light. And when they get it starts off with seeing colors more richly, and starts off with feeling things more deeply. But eventually, there's a reason why synesthesia is associated with these experiences. And the way that I've thought about it in the past, which I like, is, if you have a picture, you can get a certain amount of information from that picture. But if you have, if you have a second frame in like a 2-picture movie, that one little additional sort of look, that the parallaxing of where the different things are in space gives everything so much more depth. And I think it's similar to that, right? Like I think, it's like having one eye versus having stereoscopic vision. You get depth out of that. And even meditation, like Jeff said, you can get a little bit of like a view around the corner from like what you are normally looking at. And that's by itself is really cool and really, exciting. But that little bit of extra information makes you aware of how much more there is. And it doesn't need to be metaphysical. Like if you believe in metaphysics or anything like that, by all means, that's great. I have a certain amount of belief in that there's more to reality than we experience. I think there has to be. But even if you don't, there's something to hold on to. There's something to grasp onto with that little bit of extra insight into the world by like parallaxing, having one view of the world and then seeing something even slightly differently. It means that there's so much more out there. The implication is that there's so much more out there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex. We're here today because we believe that music and visual art and the arts, the ineffable of our lives, the intangibles, the values that we can feel, maybe not all the time touch. We're here because we believe they matter to the human experience. I'd be interested to hear from Tom and Eileen. What is the role of music and art, visual art, the arts in the human experience in this day and age, the human experience, and what does the human experience mean in 2023? I'd like to hear from Eileen and Tom, please.
After you, Eileen.
All right, so I suppose the arts and music have been with us as long as we've known that humans exist, pretty much. So they come from this very ancient primal place. And they really are this way within which we can continually express and connect with life itself. So it's this communion between us and what created us and what's around us through the gates of our senses and our sensory experience. So, you know, you've got arts are visual or tactile, and you've got music that deals with the sense, the sound, and also the felt space of us. And it's this kind of orchestra of sensory awareness and sensory experience through which we then create this reality, you know, in our minds, in as well as in this physical sense. So it's why they have been these great tools throughout time for storytelling, and especially for communion and community, as in, you know, you always have to have the artist or the musician creating something, and then to complete that communion with life, you have to have someone witnessing that. And so you've got this kind of expression that happens in this witnessing, which is fascinating really to even think about, because we have so many senses, and each of those senses has multiple ways of expressing themselves. So you end up in this like orchestra of sensory experience that we're in all the time. And because the arts and music can basically reflect that back to us, we have this ongoing evolution of our relationship to ourselves and life itself through these mediums, which is to me just playful and amazing. And the great thing with music and the arts is that they can also, they're about textures and feelings. So we get away from this good or bad duality, let's say, and we're into this realm of using all sorts of textures and colors to express the ways that we can navigate being here. And they're also interestingly abstract spaces in a sense. They don't talk like, you know, music and art don't talk like us, but they talk in texture and color, which is also the way nature speaks. Nature speaks in vibration, in sound. So that's why I feel that they've been so used, especially as we know by indigenous cultures throughout time, to talk to those other realms, because it is abstract sensory space, this elemental intelligence that's built into us and built into life, is the door through which we can experience many realms of being, whether that you call it spirit. Some of us prefer to be more materialistic than others. I actually like to stick it into the mystery and leave it there and allow the mystery to continually reveal itself through our creative expression.
Thank you, Eileen, very much. Tom, would you like to add to that?
That was absolutely exemplary. Well, I think from my perspective, if we're looking at, you know, quickly back to psychedelic and the term, and we think about what's going on, which is this sort of sensory perception amplification or intensification. And as a result of that, perhaps a sort of distortion or even a hallucination brought about by intense or intensified feelings. Art is a lovely, let's call it a key to unlocking this door to these other realms of sensory perception. And it's beautiful because there are universals and there's also this sort of subjectivity. So it speaks to all of us in slightly different ways, but there are these universals that can carry us on the same journey together. So when Eileen was sort of referring to this initial kind of context where if you think about indigenous tribes, and a shaman would be the conductor, if you like, of these particular journeys, taking us, guiding us. The music would be something that would facilitate and inspire based on how we've passed our own personal experiences. Music, quite incredible, being a non-verbal language. It's a proto-language. We rewind back. Before we even spoke, we made noises and we started to communicate using noise. And what's so lovely is that, you know, language is this sort of quite a highly evolved form of music expression, if you want to call it that. So if going back to music as an art form delivers this meaning to groups or individuals, what we're doing is we're decoding things that are perhaps baked in as memories. Then with the use of a psychedelic assisted journey, we're going somewhere completely different. We're going from, let's say, a 3D realm into a fourth dimension or even a fifth dimensional realm. And this is where it gets really, really interesting and exciting, is because art has this extraordinary ability to impact us. You know, right now we could be listening to something or looking at something, and that sensory perception is delivering an impact and effect. We feel something, it carries us somewhere. We decode meaning from that. Yet with a psychedelic enhancement, we can literally go somewhere unimaginable, perhaps. And this is the beauty of what we're talking about today, music as a psychedelic medicine.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That parlays us wonderfully into the next section, which is, you know, there's a lot of talk now about engaging psychedelics for people who have never considered it before. And there's more information about it out there. There's various conferences about there. We're talking about ancient technologies, ancient medicines, bringing them into our contemporary landscape to heal a lot of time. I mean, we talk about healing a lot of the time, to grow. There's discussion over like supplemental, almost like vitamin kind of components, whether it's microdosing or, you know, like how do we, our relationship to compounds that are found in nature, for the most part, some of them are made in a laboratory too, but the relationship is deepening because our understanding, we need something, right? Like in this time, in this contemporary time, we find ourselves needing some tools to get to a point that feels true, to get to a point that feels more grounded as we're pulled in different directions through consumer society and through political conflict and through climatological challenges. Like we're trying to get grounded. Okay, so we talk about the role that music can play in the psychedelic setting specifically. Now, for clinicians, that may mean administering a compound to someone and then augmenting the session with other tools, and music is that tool. So when you think about music being used in a clinical setting or ceremonial setting, administered by either a shaman or a psychotherapist, talk to me specifically about the dynamics entailed in the interaction between music from the outside having an effect on a process that is highly, highly personal and highly, highly individualized. How do we design these containers, and how do we affect these containers compassionately, responsibly, and wisely as artistic creators?
You know, you pointed out that music is such a personal experience, and it's not only it's cultural, because we don't listen to music in a void. We grew up with music. You know, like Tom was saying, it's something so fundamental to the human race that it goes back as far as the race itself. And there are no cultures in the world, or any cultures in history that we know of, that did not have some kind of music. Even cultures that didn't necessarily have written language, didn't have hieroglyphics or any other form of communication. It seems that that music is the one phenomenon that exists with all cultures at all times. I personally feel that we connect to music organically as individuals, but to some extent, it's parlayed from our childhoods, from how we were raised, the music we listened to growing up. We're living in an age now where we have access to listen to music from every part of the world, which has been incredibly enriching. One of the great things that the internet has brought to the ability to listen to all kinds of music. You know, it's that question of, you know, hey, what kind of music do you listen to? Oh, I listen to all music. That never used to be true. It's fairly true now. But I think every one of us has a lens in which music moves us based on the lens of our life's experience. So I think it ends up becoming a very personal thing, and it's reflected in the culture that each of us comes from. You know, Alex saying that, you know, having to listen to this, you know, this this techno music while trying to have this experience was off-putting, and I get that. As a composer, I find music during psychedelic experiences to be a little disruptive. I actually very much prefer not to have music in my experiences because I get a little too analytical. Even when I'm on a journey, I'm still kind of able to suss out, oh, that was kind of a cool thing. I wonder how they did that. So because I'm a little left-brained about music, I have a preference. But everybody that I've talked to has expressed that they really do have a preference. I think the thing about shaman able to guide experiences, psychedelic experiences, and making certain musical choices is actually quite extraordinary, because it seems to be drawn from an enormous amount of experience and wisdom, and maybe even transcends culture to some extent. But I think the ability to say, well, this is the music that opens me up. This is the music in which I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I feel embraced, makes all the difference in the world to my experience.
I'll add like one little thing to that. This is all, it's not a tangent, but like what's kind of interesting about music is that it is a fascinating thing about music. It's not kind of interesting. It's it doesn't make sense why we have it. Like Oliver Sacks, I forget what the name of the book is that he wrote about music, but
Musicophilia.
Musicophilia. I think it's in that he wrote, like, it doesn't really make sense that music exists. Like there isn't really, there's a lot of theories about why it exists, but there isn't, any one sort of overarching thing. But not only does it exist, there are certain things that are universal. Like whenever you see music across cultures, even in like isolated cultures, they respond to octaves, right? Like the awareness of octaves is there, but then how you subdivide it just becomes a cultural thing. So like in modern culture, we have 12 steps, and like I think it's like Hungarian folk music, there's like 42 steps within octaves. And so like my ear, it sounds so jarring, just because I'm not built for it. Literally, like I wasn't, it's not that I'm not built for it or wired for it. I wasn't nurtured in it, right? So it's not right for me. But the fact that there are these things that music exists, full stop, is just like, why is such a bizarre thing. And almost similarly, why these sort of crazy phenomenological experiences exist that are universal, with psychedelics, or just with just different types of profound states, but there's similarities between them for everybody. There's certain sort of recurring themes that you see, even though they are these incredibly profound and very personal and subjective experiences. Like there's a parallel there. I don't really know what to do with it, but like, the fact that music exists and it doesn't really make sense. And within that, there's certain structures within that are universal. And then some that are cultural. And then similarly, like with psychedelic, or just like psychedelic-like experiences, there are recurring themes that seem to transcend culture and are just built into us. It's just a comment more than anything else. I don't really have anything.
I mean, I'll just add on to that as well. So I'm originally from Ecuador, and I work with indigenous tribes, as mentioned, and I got very interested in shamanic wisdom, mostly because of, again, plant medicines that I'd experienced in that way. And, we know now from the clinical research that music's being hailed as the second therapist in the room. And why would that be, And there's certain indigenous tribes where they wouldn't do any ceremony without music, because they feel it's such a fundamental part of the experience. And even today on a podcast, I was listening about how certain African cultures will use specific drumming rhythms to clear patterns of the tribe. So they understand that there's specific ways of being a human that cannot be processed by talking or thinking. They have to be done by feeling, by trance. And, they'll be in dances for hours, and it's only an hour in where you start moving the energy that's required in order to clear whatever pattern you're doing. And you do that again as a community and around story time or around a fire. There's very also these kind of held containers that help all of that move through. And another thing to consider, again, from an Indigenous perspective, is that they talk about a dream world or a spirit world from which this material reality is formed. And so the idea of using your altered states, including music and including the arts, is to be able to walk between those worlds, to enter a dream world, to then pull that dream world into this reality to make it manifest. And especially in ayahuasca circles, they see the music as a structure. So when you're in these ceremonies, and now I've spoken to researchers about this, where they tell me that the practitioner in the ceremony makes sure that they sing a dome structure into the ceremony with the music and the tonality and the song. And the song, again, is channeled in a very specific way to help people move through specific emotions and the specific things. Now, what I think is also beautiful about contemporary culture is I feel that musicians kind of tap into this sometimes and they just do it, right? And we have this incredible array of contemporary eclectic music that now we can access. There's been so many moments where I put on music and then I find out that the artist was trying to express the same thing that I was feeling. And I didn't know that at the time. I intuitively put on a song. We've all had those moments where you just get so grounded by a song or by some words. But within a therapeutic setting, it's important to understand the person's cultural background, because the music, for example, for me, the psilocybin playlist, the playlists that are used in clinical trials don't fully work for me because of the classical tones or the opera music. I was built in Latin America. So some of those songs are too triggering for me. They're too, to me, they felt a bit colonial sometimes, and I had to just get them to turn it off. So what I learned from some time I spent with Mendel Kaelin was around you becoming your own music therapist, and over a period of time, really understanding what kind of music helps you relax, helps you feel safe, and helps you open up. But most recently, I consult on music for certain, I consulted on a recent trial for DMT, and really what we end up doing is just creating the safest feeling and relaxing music that actually does a big job of holding space. So you start with that baseline of softness and safety so people can trust the experience, because as soon as people feel safe and they can trust the journey through the music, it opens up everything else. And then you can start adding other layers. There's a bit of a science in the contemporary space that has been worked out that we could, I could talk hours about that, but yeah, I just wanted to also kind of bring awareness to the fact that we've learned from Indigenous backgrounds, we're learning from contemporary music, and we're now in this kind of dance between the two, trying to figure out what is best within each context. Mm-hmm.
Eileen, thank you so much. And we will have more of these discussions if everyone's willing. There are hours and hours to go through, and it's a lot of fun for me. So whoever's down, I'm down whenever. And I have questions I want to ask you specifically about your work, but I want to kind of parlay what you were saying into some questions I have for Tom. We are missing. Boy, wouldn't it be amazing if each of us had a half hour at the end of the day to experience a tribal beat or a regulatory beat that got us, that maybe cleared the energy of our day, or that is profound technology. We're at an era where we're talking about ChatGPT and AI and job loss and writers' strikes, and we've had incredible awareness of the power of sound historically and deeply. That, like you're talking about the Icaros and the ayahuasca ceremony, and actually building a structure using sound, or building pyramids, or using pyramids as sound chambers, or just the technology of sound. I don't know how that hasn't grown in relationship to other consumer technologies. Tom, if I may put this idea out there, you were kind of a trance facilitator publicly for a long time. In reading part of your bio, you talked about kind of burning out after a certain time, and that's like, I guess that's after a lot of live performance, a lot of concert hall facilitation, a lot of like, but musicians in this electronic space, they're trance facilitators in a way, and I've always taken that term seriously. Trance music. I play rock and roll music, but I consider it to have a strong trance element because the beat is core always, and it means something to me. My favorite beat is 120, anything at 120, and I only recently thought of it as being synonymous with or analogous to the human heart, the anchoring there. So just that, I mean, beat and trance is so powerful. Tom, you mentioned that you had recently gone through a deeply inspiring course called Music for and as Psychedelic Therapy with Dr. Mendel Kalin, and you were the only musician in attendance. Everybody else was psychedelic-assisted therapists. So what have you, Tom, and some of your peers in the electronic dance trance space known for a long time, and what has the audience known? And you don't always have time to really break it down and nerd out and talk about it in words, but there's something going on there, and it's a pretty profound thing. Can you talk about where you're seeing that, what you've been expressing for a long time? What are we picking up on clinically now? How are we trying to maybe take some of these communal music lessons and apply them clinically?
So what's really interesting is, obviously, if you observe millions of people responding to melody, harmony, and rhythm in a universal way, you can start to create, there's patterns are starting to form in front of you. You think, okay, well, that combination of those ingredients is delivering something profound at scale. Right, let's go back to the lab. And I guess I've been a bit of an outsider in the industry because I've always come from this sort of curious, scientific mind background. I love music. Intuitively, it's something that I'm able to create. But equally, I want to know why. Why is it working? How can we make it better and more useful? So as a functional sound designer, I'm looking for ways to inform better, more ethical, more socially responsible guiding principles to create sound that delivers, let's say, a more healthy effect. If we just quickly unpack soundscape ecology, because this is something I wanted to add to what we were talking about just now. Bernie Krause in 1979 started looking at soundscape ecology, and actually in his lovely book, The Great Animal Orchestra, Finding the Origins of Music in the World's Wild Places, there are these three layers. The first layer is called geophony, which is earth sound. It's elemental sound, it's wind, it's water. The second layer above that is biophony, which is creature sound, which I love this. And these two in combination deliver that sort of safe feeling that Eileen was talking about. If you have that in your music, that's going to make you feel safe instantly, because if you hear the world around you, that gives you the context, the setting. And if you hear animals and creatures, you know that the weather's probably okay and you're not in any sense of danger. Then there's another layer on top of this, which is called anthropophony. And anthropophony is divided into two types. There's intentional and unintentional. Unintentional anthropophony, if you like, is chaotic sound. It's noise pollution. It's the sound that's triggering and delivers the wrong direction on the nervous system. Is not very healthy. And then you've got this lovely definition of music, intentional anthropophony, which I love. But it's part of these layers. Anthropophony would not exist if there wasn't geophony and biophony. So I'm pulling together, if you like, the roots of the origins of music and sound as a response to being in a setting, which is the world, your immediate environment, culturally speaking, the sounds that are impacting you. And I'm looking for these particular patterns. Where can I utilize these particular settings and scenes to deliver a particular effect? So, for example, if you've been on holiday in the Mediterranean, you'll probably, you might have had a positive experience listening to, for example, gentle waves on the shore and cicadas chirping in the background. Those two simple things, the geophony of gentle waves lapping on a shore, here we go, that's why I set this up the background, and cicadas behind me in the jungle here, that combination is incredibly therapeutic to the nervous system. Now we've got this incredible opportunity to start working with sound and music in a functional way, layering things up and creating some really, really powerful, if you like, almost prescriptive journeys, knowing that the heart responds to rhythmic entrainment, the brain waves respond to rhythmic entrainment. By rhythmic entrainment, I mean we start to synchronize with a beat or pulse. So if I'm doing this like this, eventually you will start to nod. You can do it with different frequencies in either ear. Binaural beats is something that people might have come across. We can look at ways where the heart is literally responding in a very natural way to the pulse. Obviously, in a club, you've got a very powerful 120 hertz kick drum that's definitely delivering something that you're going to respond to. So tribal rhythms, that goes way back. We respond rhythmically at that level. And then harmony is, if you like, the glue that kind of gives everything this feeling, the emotionality. And then the melodic part is, if you like, the storytelling. It's the narration, which could be lyrical, or it could just be tuneful. So with all these ingredients as composers and artists, we've got an extraordinary palette to explore, taking people on meaningful journeys, delivering a safe place to be vulnerable, to not feel threatened, and to allow them to kind of experience these journeys.
Tom, do you mind if I ask? Because I've looked into this a bit, but you definitely have more than I would have. And I think that's like a really well put way to kind of put all of that, like this sort of I don't know, the different layers of things and how we inherently sort of grasp onto them and what they mean to us. In particular, that like the melody is the narrative and everything else is like a lot of structure. Like given that like the conscious experience of these, of like being on psychedelics or deep meditation or something like that, is it's a weird thing, right? Like you can do a brain scan, like an MRI of someone on psychedelics, and you can see what's happening, but the conscious like real-time experience of it for you as a person is it's a bizarre thing to kind of juxtapose. What I'm trying to just get to is with binaural beats in particular, because I feel like that's been given a lot of spotlight, and this is something I've looked into, and I've done like, you know, design projects around binaural beats, but I did it on kind of the theory of it. Have you how much, in your opinion or in your research or in your realm of expertise, like, can I ask, like, the efficacy of binaural beats? Is it how legit is it?
So there was a meta-analysis, a systematic review of binaural beat studies published in May this year, because I have to be all over this, because some of the clients that I work with are saying, please put binaural beats in because they do something. Look at YouTube. Yeah, hold on a minute. Let's just really understand what's going on here. So the difference between one frequency delivered literally like this to one ear and one frequency on this creates a difference. So 100 here, 103 here, the difference is 3 hertz. That's a delta wave binaural beat. Yes, there is some research to sort of suggest that an effect can be delivered, but I got to the bottom of this systematic review and it says inconclusive. So some people are getting an effect, some people are not. There could be a placebo effect in this as well. It's very difficult to say. I think beta wave and theta wave are definitely two binaural beats that have a bit more research to support them than others. I guess it's a case of there needs to be further studies around how this could be useful. I wonder how, in the context of music as medicine, binaural beats could also enhance a psychedelic assisted journey. Because if we think what's going on there, this is actually part of the course that I did with Mendel Kaelen. You get enhanced meaningfulness, enhanced emotionality. The processing and the perception is twisted a little bit, and it's triggering autobiographical memory. Now, to what degree could something like binaural beats help with that? Well, this year there's been a lot of interest in 40 hertz and gamma wave in induction, which is quite interesting. That's basically Zen monk mode. You kind of go into a very kind of high place. I think we're a little way off with the technology to deliver this really effectively. That's my bottom line opinion, because some earphones don't deliver it in the same way that others do. I work with vibroacoustic technology, a sub pack, and that can definitely assist with some of the, let's say, felt sound induction and transduction, which can deliver some really powerful effects. And there's some great research around that. So we're in a really interesting space right now. I kind of see a future where maybe in that setting, the chair that you're on might have vibroacoustics in it, and we start to look at, can we the experience using felt sound, so to really get into the sound, immerse yourself into it. So, and immersive spatial audio, another really exciting realm we've got into. We did some studies last year with the Spatial Sound Institute looking at the power of presence in an immersive spatial audio experience. If you design sound intentionally within this sort of 360 realm, you can really bring people to that sort of sense of being grounded and present, which is very powerful. It makes people even more, let's say, engaged with that journey that you're taking people on. Sorry, I could riff for hours on the science, neuroscience.
I'm just gonna add,
I think, go for it.
just a tiny thing to that, to kind of counterbalance a lot of the tech talk, if you don't mind me. If tech was to be deleted tomorrow, you can just use your breath. Let's not just please also use your breath, because if you're not breathing deeply enough, there's only so far that the experience can also work with you. So I would say, tapping, using all the tech stuff is great. And also let's not forget that the technology within our bodies is just as important to tap into. Otherwise, there's just so much being developed nowadays. And I can see that people might even just feel a little bit lost in everything that's on the internet. But to simplify it, and if you didn't have a lot of tools around you, just making sure that you're breathing and also relaxing the body. As soon as the body's relaxed, all the gates open up. Mm-hmm.
Tom, you said something which, I mean, you said that you put the 100 in one ear, 103 in the other ear, and then the delta wave, the 3 hertz. The difference is the delta wave. And it could just be placebo, because as you said, they got to the end of the article and it said results are inconclusive. In How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan's talking to Roland, what's his name? Roland at Hopkins, Roland Griffiths. And the way that he describes what psychedelics are, I think, is so good. He calls it just an incredibly powerful placebo. Right, because it's your mind doing the work. It's not like SSRIs where you're trying to maintain a certain level of serotonin constantly, and that's supposed to maintain a certain level of happiness. It's you have this one very intense experience, and yes, there is a drug involved, right? But it's your. That's why the whole set and setting component of it is implicit. Is that it's you doing the work, and similarly, with binaural beats, what's interesting about binaural beats is you have the 100, you have the 103, but your conscious experience of it is you make the phasing in your mind. That's real, right? Everybody experiences that. The implication of that is it could be placebo, could be, it's kind of hard to, that's the part that's hard to study, but it seems like universally the phasing that you hear between the two frequencies is universal, but that doesn't make any sense, right? You should hear one frequency here and one frequency here, and they should be separate. But you don't, you hear the phasing, and that's your mind doing the work. You're inventing that sound to yourself in that moment. So it might be a placebo, but that might also be enough.
Well, I don't think it's placebo, because clearly brainwaves are influenced by a pulse and a beat. We do have, you can put an EEG headset on, you can look what's going on and measure it. That's definitely not placebo. But I think people's sensitivity and receptivity to this kind of intervention is probably more of an interesting thing to talk about, because if an individual going into it, and remember this thing, meeting someone where they are, everybody going into these journeys is coming from a different place, mentally, emotionally, physiologically, spiritually. We just don't know. You don't know where someone's head's at, mind's at, heart's at that particular moment where they're just starting the journey. So that's what's really crucial. Everything that Eileen said about delivering this quite sort of gentle transition into a state of safety and deep relaxation, that priming, if you like, for the nervous system to be receptive, for the mind to be receptive, I think is crucial. Incidentally, I've had one of the most potent experiences literally just doing breath work. A particular type of let's say, quite like psychedelic sort of style of breath work, holotropic it's called. And I had natural DMT release just through using breathing and holds, breath holds, very intense breathing pattern technique. And I pineal gland, boom, DMT off through the purple, green, blue fractal wormhole. That, I didn't need anything at that point.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that in terms of some of the fundamental mechanics of altering mind. So there's some kind of very fundamental principles to understand, which are, we're trying to access these what are called alpha, theta, and delta brain states, is what's been categorized as an altered state or a trance state. And I think there was a bit of research done about this, and it's different for every person. So don't anyone in the audience think this is specific, like for everyone. This is a general study around like how long it takes for us to settle the mind and let it go. Like once you stop thinking about all the usual problems, the to-do list, that's your beta brainwaves going off. And as soon as you start doing anything that relaxes you, that focuses the mind, you start kind of deepening that state of openness and then sharpness of awareness. So you can do this, for example, and it takes about 20 minutes to half an hour. So if you sit and do anything for that amount of time, whether you're drawing, you're playing music, you're cooking, you're breathing, it's going to do that job. And that's why it also matters in terms of feeling which practice is most attuned to you. We're all like musical instruments, right? And we're different musical instruments. So it's up to each of us to feel into which type of breath work suits me. Just because everyone says, I don't know, Wim Hof is the thing, or whatever, there's so many modalities. Like really, you are the conductor of your orchestra. You have to be the one that chooses the right components of that orchestra to make it work. And so, but again, very simple brain science, just sit and concentrate on one thing for 20 minutes, which again, in this modern society, also go and do it, because if we're so distracted, actually focusing on one thing is going to blow your top off.
Eileen, thank you for raising that point. It's always important that we keep that at the forefront of our thinking, how highly individualized everything is. But these tools can be adapted for so many different needs. I think we've got a couple minutes left, and I don't want to leave without discussing your artwork specifically, Eileen. You did the cover work for John Hopkins' Music for Psychedelic Therapy, and I think that's one of the albums that sort of set this new era in motion and probably influenced the Music as Medicine, the Psychedelic Therapy, Microdose music label. How do you synthesize your experience into your particular watercolor artwork, and why did that work for John's album?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll try and keep this as succinct as possible. So I've been studying consciousness forever, for 15 years. I got fascinated by it because I've always dreamt a lot. So my dreams are now more psychedelic than anything else. So for me, the dream world has always felt like this misty world. And then I started using water as a metaphor for consciousness itself, because it shapeshifts. Water just turns into different things as our consciousness does. So I chose watercolors specifically for that reason, so that they could help me embody that watery, mystical nature of the dream world in the psychedelic and musical space. And then I started just making these watercolors just from my feeling space. I will also mention that I do them in meditation with music. I never paint without that. And I never paint when I'm not in some kind of, I don't do them on psychedelics all the time. It's very few times I use psychedelics for that, but I'm always in a meditative state when I create them, because I want you to feel what I want you to feel the peace or the openness. So I started painting around not long before John started making the album, and he'd been thinking about liquid architecture, his music being like liquid architecture. So as soon as he saw my paintings, he immediately said, these are amazing. And then a few months later, he was like, this is going to be part of the album, because we ended up having talks about, he would ask me, how do you make your art? And I would say, well, I just feel it and I paint what I feel or what I see. And it ended up being that him and I create our art and music the very same way. We really, it's just such a felt experience that we don't question. And it is just this liquid space for both of us. For me, then finally, I just ended up kind of coining this numinous field concept to give a name to that space where our human consciousness meets the intelligence of music within an altered state of consciousness, because it's always felt like the sea of sensations that we're swimming in. So fundamentally, I just want you to feel like you're in a dream state, in the space of connection, and it's all kind of nature focused and based, which is a lot of the album has been inspired by nature, the album that John made.
Thank you, Aline. Thank you very much. Alex, you're working in the visual space also, and briefly, you're providing tools for artists to create visual components to integrate into their work. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, Volta is we make mixed reality creation and performance software for musicians, and we made it so you can literally just like open it up. Your camera will put you inside this 3D world. You start playing music, and it starts reacting to that world. And you can use our templates and stuff where you can just build your own 3D world and put yourself inside of this space. The sort of long-term ambition for me personally, like it's there are a bunch of us working on this project now, but like for me personally, is I think everybody has some sort of like creative universe in them. For some people it's a little bit more visually literal, like Eileen, like you said, and creating a tool that can help people quite literally put themselves inside of that space is really what this is. Like I like to say that like the artists that we sort of aspire to let people facilitate similar things. You look at like Daft Punk and Gorillaz and Nine Inch Nails and Bjork and who else? The common thread between, they're clearly very different types of music, but the common thread between them is they create, I mean, John Hopkins or Max Cooper is actually a better example than John Hopkins because there's such a visual nature to it. But the thing that they do is they create these universes, like these quite visual spaces, and then music is the core of that thing. But they still build this sort of creative universe around themselves. And what would it be like if we all could do that, right? It's taken a lot of work for Daft Punk to make the Pyramid, for Max Cooper to make his visual production, for Gorillaz to write the whole sort of like visual comic, narrative comic nature to their music, and build that into such a big cultural thing that people care to go and see and watch. But like, what if everybody could do that in a way that they could do it from their bedroom in a literal way, right? Like not just a theoretical, like, here's an idea and here's a story and here's a music that goes with it. But what if you could actually put yourself inside of that? What would people do? That's what drives me. Like, we don't have this as an official strap line for the company, but like, we like to say, you know, if experience is the canvas, our aim is to be the paintbrush.
Amazing. Everyone, thank you so much for sharing what you've shared today. I think another conversation would be fun and warranted. You can visit Alex's work through Volta. Jeff is composing for film and television and whatever happens. And I'm sure you've got
and Microdose Records.
And Microdose music also. Yeah, fantastic. So you've got work forthcoming on the label?
I have, yeah, quite a bit.
Amazing. Amazing. Eileen's constantly working and painting and creating. And where can people find more of your work and more about you, Eileen?
Website, which is eileen-hall.com, and you can find me on Instagram as well, hall_Eileen. And yeah, got some interesting things coming up this year, so keep in touch.
Thank you so much. And Tom, thanks for sharing about everything you're involved with now. Mental health first aid, boy, I could talk to you about that all day long, as well as stress management and sleep science, which is something that's so integral to everyone. What's a good touch point for you, Tom?
I mean, either Instagram at Tom Middleton Music, or whitemirror.studio is our wellness innovation consultancy. Come and say hi. We're actually trying to kind of awaken the music industry to the fact that entertainment is worth about 23 billion. Wellness as a sector is 4.7 trillion and growing. So just for artists and creators out there that are maybe struggling, thinking, oh, what do I do now? You know, pandemic decimated careers. What I want people to think about is this idea that actually people are suffering on a daily basis, and we could be creating types of content that are more helpful and useful.
Awesome.
Sorry,
yeah,
I forgot.
Everyone, thank you.
I should probably mention, we do have some prints left from John's album. Actually, some people that were asking about art prints. I keep forgetting to say we have a few left on the website because I was being asked before. So for anyone that was wondering, you can still get some of the prints from the album on my website.
Amazing. Amazing. For everybody in the chat, thank you for being here. Thank you for commenting and being part of the discussion. I'd love to do this again. Whoever's down, we can organize it. Thank you to Microdose Music for putting this together, and we'll see everybody again soon.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Nice bit.